So good afternoon, thank you for being here. Thank you for being chilly, because it's too hot here and it's definitely for us a very strange feeling like being in the... Okay, today we will discuss more about, as Tess already said, about integration policies on EU level and especially in some of the member states particularly. We have a guest from Austria who will basically introduce us with the situation in Austria. It's my pleasure and privilege actually to be able to moderate this session and to introduce you to Faika El-Nagashi, who is a member of City Council and Provincial Parliament from Vienna and also spokesperson for integration, migration and human rights of the Viennese Green Party. Welcome. And you already have chance to listen to Franjo Steiner from Interkulturelles Centrum from Vienna, Austria, who is dedicated to integration issues, integration practices towards the migrants, especially as we have heard already about many of the community-based projects, and from 2004 he's been actively dealing on developing the mission statements on integration. First of all, just a short introduction and then we proceed. Basically, I guess that in this session we will tackle on the issues on very general level, like speaking about different dimensions of integration, be that accommodation, reception, as well as the housing, different kind of policies, as well as a housing policy, health policy, employment, education. But also we will discuss more about some broader context of how these policies, integration policies, especially in the Austria as this respective country, have changed, so to say, especially in the latest context of the newcomers, of people, of refugees coming in the last year and a half, how we do witness different negative sentiments within the society that basically go against the tendencies and the fostering of the government of different stakeholders in this area of integration policies. I guess that when you put it in the broader perspective of speaking about some 20 million of third country nationals, foreigners living in the European Union, as well as 15 million more of those coming from the second citizens from other EU countries, then it's definitely visible that basically costs of not investing into integration policies for these people, for those population, are far bigger basically than investing in these integration policies. Saying that today one of the greatest challenges of our time is to basically look upon the process of integration. We can also be critical upon that term. Do we speak about really integration? Is it just a cover for assimilation tendencies? Or we can come up with some other concept and some other approaches. I guess that we will also try to tackle these issues in this session. So without further ado, I will give floor to Faika El-Nagashi, who will present us more about the Austrian example, the Austrian context, and especially give us a little bit broader perspectives how the things basically changed in the last 12 months or more. Faika, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Drago. Dobar dan. How are you all? I hope you can see me. I can not really see all of you. I hope this works well. If not, then just tell me and I will be happy also to stand up. My name is Faika El-Nagashi, as Drago already introduced me, and I'm very happy to be here with you on this occasion, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I'm very impressed with the building that we're in, and especially with the context that it has. It is so heavily loaded with context, and I think that it is a context that is also quite relevant for the topic that we're talking about, because it has to do and deals with how society deals with certain groups and communities, and with regimes and with methods of discipline. So I'm invited to talk about the situation in Austria and integration policies. That is the overall frame. But I find it very difficult to talk about integration policies as such, because I think that the political context very much affects the outcome and what you actually do. And depending on who you would invite to talk to you about integration policies in Austria, you would hear a different story. And so I think it is very important also to know who's talking. And so I would like to give you a bit of a background information, just very briefly, about myself. I identify as a queer woman of color. I used to be a political activist for a long time. I worked in NGOs for 15 years. For a long time, I worked in a migrant women's self-organization based in Vienna, working on a European context also, on a European level. One focus was on empowering migrant sex workers, so a highly marginalized and stigmatized group. And recently, since the elections that we had in Vienna, I became a politician. So I still consider myself an activist, but I am aware that people consider me a politician. So that is also a bit of a gap. I'm a politician with the Green Party. In Vienna, we are in the situation that we are part of the city government or the municipal government. Vienna is a municipality and the province at the same time, and the capital city of Austria. And coincidentally, in this last year, since I've been a politician and a councilwoman at the municipality of Vienna, we've had many very relevant developments, actually on a global scale, but very much relevant for the European region. And that is what I would like to focus on and explain a bit maybe my interpretation or an analysis that I would like to give to you. And also at any moment, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. So the title that I gave to this presentation very briefly, and as I said, I would like to look at the time frame from last year to now, more or less, a year and a half back, is from refugees welcome to the state of emergency. And this state of emergency, this is where we are now, is not just a matter of saying, it is an actual law that Austria is about to pass and bring into effect, which is called state of emergency. And it is directly linked to the presence of refugees. When we look at the role of Austria in all of this, and I think that Austria actually had and has a crucial role in dominating the discourse and shaping the discourse for various reasons. What we had a year and a half ago, more or less, were protests by the right parties and the far-right parties against the presence of refugees in Austria. So this is something that has been going on constantly, and they were having these protests increasingly, but they failed because the whole sentiment in the population was not supportive of the very discriminative position that the far-right was taking. At the same time, we had a critical situation at the biggest camp for refugees, a registration camp for refugees in Austria, a critical situation that was actually constructed, that was made to be critical and to create a situation of failure, where we had refugees who were not taken care of with regards to their very, very basic needs. So people were sleeping outside in the open, the children, small children, babies, families, the whole situation was completely unorganized. And it was not clear at that time why the situation was so out of organization. What we had was that this camp was by then, and this is not new, this has been going on since 10 years, privatized. So the organization, the running of the camp, used to be done by an NGO, and 10 years ago this was privatized and has taken on by a Swiss company, which was the cheapest or the best bidder, and got the contract to do this organization of the camp. And I think this is a relevant information because this coincides with economical and political developments that are going on in general currently in our world. So, and what then happened was that civil society became very, very active. So it was without any political direction or political parties involved, that neighbors surrounding the camp in little villages, and also many people driving there from Vienna, they came there, they provided food, anything that was really needed, blankets. They were very active and very present, and it was clear that it was actually the people who took on supporting the refugees who were there. It was really felt as a summer of solidarity. It was summer, the weather was nice, many students were off, so they were free from university, they got involved. And it was it was an immediate action that you could take to help people on a very basic level immediately. We had images on the media all the time of people filling up their cars with water, with fruits, bread, and then driving to the camp and delivering it. It was a very easy way to help. And a lot of people liked that. You know, they felt good about it. And also with regards to the camp, just to include that, the situation was so bad that Amnesty International actually sent a delegation to check the situation at the camp. So it became an actual issue. Just some photos for you to see. This is one of the actions that the far right did in front of housing for asylum seekers or refugees. And this is a photo that the journalist shot of this action. They made a protest there. And so on this photo you can see some people who were trying to enter their house, the place that they were staying at, including a little child. And this created very bad media for the far right, because it was considered extremely rude to do such a protest in front of a family or a child that were fleeing from war, a war situation, and that were trying to enter their house. These are some images of the situation at the camp, where this failure was produced by non-action, and I think very consciously produced. So people were sleeping in buses outside of the camp, though there was place inside, but there were a number of buildings that they were not opening up. And there was also some protest beginning, and this protest was done by refugees themselves who were staying at this camp, and by some activists and some locals from the surrounding villages. So some protests were beginning at that time. It was not very strong, not very visible, but it took place. And it was important also that at this point, refugees started to get involved in various actions. So the political protest on one hand, but then also other activities, cultural activities. A theater group formed, for example, and this theater group is still performing, and the play that they have, which evolved since then, but predominantly concerns itself with the situation at the camp. So they also there are different ways of activism that evolved since then. So then summer was ending, and we were in September more or less, and the situation changed. And one main element in this was the death of 71 refugees who died in a truck on the Austrian highway. And this was a very, very strong and shocking moment that brought a lot of the population to the realization that the legislations around refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants do have consequences and do have life or death consequences. That this is real, and that this is happening actually at the borders, that people have to try and find ways to enter the country with the support of others, and also that they die. The situation in Hungary then became very, very difficult. So Hungary was not providing support, but at the same time was also confronted with the situation that a big group of refugees made their way until Hungary and then were in a way stuck there. And they wanted to continue to travel to other countries, but the European Union at that point did not agree on a common policy with regards to that and did not facilitate the traveling. So at some point we also had a number of images of very, very cruel and inhumane treatment of the refugees by the Hungarian police and the Hungarian military and the Hungarian government. And these images were also, they also went through the media. Hungary by then was doing a lot of talking about putting up a fence at the border to Serbia, and there were also such iconic images almost. You might have seen that of a Hungarian camera woman who was trying to stop refugees from fleeing, from getting away from the police. So the situation that then was created was that there was a movement, so the refugees themselves started to move to change the situation and get out of that situation in Hungary, in Budapest. They left the train station, they started to move on the highway towards Austria. Austria had just had this summer of solidarity and was very proud of itself to be defending human rights, and Hungary in contrast, and there is a specific Austrian and Hungarian past and history, but Hungary on the other hand was seen as this monster in the European Union, being very cruel, ignoring human rights, and so Austria then in contrast to Hungary became or could become a defender of human rights. But what also happened at the same time was that civil society in Austria very soon took action. So while people were marching towards the borders from Hungary, people in Austria were also driving towards them. And so there are some photos. This was the incident on the highway, and this was when then refugees arrived at the train station in Vienna. So basically this happened in the course of a couple of days, where Germany decided to let refugees legally enter Germany, which then meant for Austria that what they had to do was to facilitate the transit of refugees through Austria. And there was this activity, this action of the refugees themselves moving and marching, and civil society welcoming them, civil society in Austria welcoming them. And so in the context of this situation, which I also described earlier, the Austrian and Hungarian authorities decided to have a sort of cooperation and to actually, with trains and buses, facilitate the travel of the refugees to Austria, to Vienna, and then onwards to Germany. And this was met by a number of civil society actors who were not necessarily organized. So they were individuals who just came to do something. They showed up at the train stations, they provided food, they did the shopping, they handed out food. A number of members of various migrant communities also came out, and not only did they provide all the support that the others did, but they also did help with interpretation and with accompanying them to doctors, to hospitals. Some gave birth when they arrived. So a number of assistance services were needed, which were provided. And here on this photo, that is not just someone. This is the former Minister of Interior Affairs, who used to be a relevant player. She is no longer the minister. So even she showed up at the train station. So it was a situation that nobody could ignore. It was the place that you were at. Everybody was at the train stations, and so she was also there welcoming people and welcoming refugees to the safe haven that Austria was providing. Of course, as transit country. So back then it was all about refugees welcome. This is an image of the so-called refugee convoy. This is a group of people. At the end, I think we were 170 cars that started from a parking lot in Vienna to drive to Budapest to bring people to Vienna and to assist them and to facilitate their journey, which was an illegal action, and also Hungary threatened to imprison anyone who would try to do this. But at this point, which was at the beginning of September, they let the 170 cars pass. And we did that a couple of times, and a number of people did that, individually or in bigger organized groups. We also had a big rally, and more than 100,000 people showed up in support of refugees. So this was shortly before the elections in Vienna in October, so this was more or less a year ago at this time. At the election in Vienna, the whole election was actually built upon a showdown between left and right, and it was clearly dominated by the question of how to deal with the refugee situation, whether to support refugees or not. The far right did not win the election, but it was a narrow outcome. And already at this point, talks were starting on the governmental level about building fences, about limiting the number of refugees who would be allowed to the country, and about other restrictive measures in asylum legislation. So already at this time, a clear shift was visible, whereas before, Hungary was demonized and Orban was an inhumane exemption to what is standard within the European Union. Already shortly after that, Austria was taking on similar measures, at least it was clearly thinking about that. I would just ignore these two slides because I don't think that they're so relevant. So then we started into the new year. I just want to mention this, at the first time when the national government in Austria said we want to build a fence, we will build a fence, it was ridiculed. Nobody really took that seriously because we were just a couple of weeks before we were talking about it as an absurd idea. So when the government mentioned it, it was not even taken seriously. So then in 2016, at the beginning of this year, the sentiment considerably changed. There were the events in Cologne at New Year's Eve, and that's when the media reporting also started to considerably change. So the media then, from then on until now, focused on stories of violence, of aggression, of terror, and that is a crime, and that is the context that the reporting about refugees has been in since then. So that's also when the discussions started to focus on the Muslim community, on Islam as an inherently violent religion and system. And that is also where then the government actually did what they were talking about before. They installed this limit on the number of refugees, which they decided to be 35,700 per year, at least for this year. Then they have different numbers for the following years. So though there was a strong protest of NGOs and civil society with regards to the human rights that you would violate with such a law or a decision, they still did it. They did build fences. And what then the Minister of Exterior Affairs did was to go on a tour through different countries to agree to effectively shut down the West Balkan route for refugees. So a clear shift in the course of half a year, more or less. And that is also when they actually implemented restrictive asylum legislation, which limits asylum that you get if you do not get the recognition as an asylum seeker, but you get the subsidiary protection. Then that is limited to 3 years, and also the possibility to bring your family is very highly limited. So basically, these were all considered by NGOs and civil society as human rights violations. This is the cover of a liberal and almost leftist weekly magazine in Austria that published this cover, which I consider racist and highly stereotypical in the prediction of probably it's meant to be Arabic Muslim men. This is the cover that was published in January after the events in Cologne. So, as I said earlier, the media picked up on this kind of reporting, and not only the mainstream media or far-right media, but it was also with liberal and leftist media. This is you can see some part of the fence that has been built, and here is the same minister that you've been seeing earlier, shaking hands and welcoming refugees at the train station, presenting a campaign that has been launched in countries of origin of refugees, for example, in Afghanistan, saying in bold letters, "No asylum in Austria." And you can see above it says, "for economic reasons." So this is how they justify the campaign. Basically, it is a campaign to keep people away from leaving, from Austria. And what is also interesting is that the aesthetics of this campaign and of the poster, the way it is done, the way it looks, are very similar to the aesthetics that the far right use in their racist election posters and campaigns. So maybe also to give you a bit of a context, and I'm not sure how I'm doing with time.
You can wrap it up.
I should wrap it up, okay. To give you some numbers, so maybe I will leave out the historic part, but just to say that in 2015, 90,000 asylum seekers came to Austria. And the number of those who passed through was much higher. So for Vienna in 2016, we have approximately 20,000 asylum seekers. Those are people seeking asylum. Plus we have the majority of the 90,000 asylum seekers, as soon as they get asylum, will come and move to Vienna for very understandable reasons, because it is the capital city, because you have the most networks established there, and because Vienna is actually doing quite well, especially considered within the national context with regards to integration policies and offers. What we do in Vienna, as I said, we're doing quite well in Vienna, is that we have this coalition of the Green Party together with the Social Democrats. And also we have a very different situation in the rest of the country. So the same competition that you can see throughout the European Union with the countries leveling down what they're doing for refugees so that they try and become as unattractive as possible, the same is happening in Austria on the national level. So every province is not most provinces are not really investing on that level, and so Vienna is basically left alone, which is also a financial problem, and is also impossible to continue in that way forever. But we're trying to do as good as we can. Because we have the political constellation that we have, we agreed on a concept that we call integration from day one, which means that we try to have integration offers or the accessibility of integration measures as soon as possible. So as soon as people arrive and seek for asylum, which would normally take 4 months at least, 6 months, with some a year and a half, depending on whether there is a Dublin case or not and some other elements, but German language courses, for example, will be made accessible immediately, and also some other measures and offers will be there. But with this, we are so there are a number of things, and we can discuss about this later if you're interested in this. That Vienna is doing actually measures. But we are a bit alone in this. And the difficulty is the political aspect of it. Since more than a year, since more than 12 months, we have permanent election campaigns going on. You might be aware that we are trying to elect a president. We've been trying for quite some time now. The newest date now is December 4th. So we hope that by then we will have a new president, and there are two candidates running who couldn't be more different. One is from the far right, and the other one used to be with the Green Party, but is running as an independent candidate. But these two candidates also stand for the divide that has been going through the population. And so people are very much divided about this issue of how to address the situation of refugees. We are expecting elections on the national level very, very soon, basically as soon as we are done with the presidential election. And also, in this context, everything is discussed through this issue of the refugees. So basically, there is no intention to actually implement reasonable, long-term, sustainable, human rights-based measures, but the vision continuously is to campaign with regards to the outcome at an election. So that makes it very, very difficult to do reasonable work. And also the outcome most probably will be very problematic, because we will most probably have a conservative and far-right government after the next national election. And the discussions that we have also, all of them are focused about the situation of the refugees, but there are also some additional elements that are being, or areas that are being made up using refugees, and that is social benefits, that is social help, that is the whole area of the social welfare state is being discussed through the aspect of refugees. But this is a very, very dangerous area. And so basically we see that this issue is really in the center of all the political discussions that we currently have. And to end, I just wanted to raise maybe some issues, or also questions that we could discuss, which would be about the self-organization of refugees, and also alliances that we could build between different movements and different actors, and to reframe this debate that is very much about security and fear and danger and threats to one of a global sense of being in solidarity with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Fejka. I'm sure that in the later discussion we will tackle upon many of the issues that you already mentioned, especially this last one about how to empower and how to work more on the empowering and agency of the refugees. And it was quite precise analysis of the situation in Austrian society, especially when you showed that the lowering down the standards and derogating the rights of the refugees was totally interconnected with this so-called criminalization of the whole narrative and discourses around the migration and integration. But now Franjo will try to tell us a little bit more about the broader perspective on integration. We didn't discuss that much about very specific integration policies, and maybe in the later discussion we will come back again on that. We heard more about this so-called state of the emergency or crisis management measures, but I want to discuss more about the integration principles, and especially how to basically try to devise this kind of the argumentation that maybe even on the EU level and the national levels we have a very well established regulations and normative system, different kind of laws, bylaws and everything. But when it comes to the reality, everyday life, then basically we see that many of the measures that are envisaged are being misimplemented or not properly implemented. So my question would be how on the EU level actually we can basically think about and discuss about the better and more productive ways of the integration policies.
Okay, I would like to go back a bit in the timeline and tell you a bit about the kind of development of the integration work in Austria. Always linked a bit with the integration recommendations on the EU level. I was jumping in this integration work 2004. 2004 was exactly the moment where the EU promoted common principles, basic principles on integration. When you read these basic principles, you can say that's exactly what the NGOs have requested at this time as important aspects of integration, how to deal with integration. I have here these common principles. I will get through it very shortly. For example, integration is a dynamic two-way process of mutual accommodation by all immigrants and residents of member states. Integration implies respect for the basis values of the European Union as well, of course. Employment is a key part of the integration process. Basic knowledge of the host society's language, efforts in education, access for immigrants to institutions, frequent interaction between immigrants and member state citizens, shared forums, intercultural dialogue, the practice of diverse culture and religions is guaranteed, the participation of immigrants in the democratic process, which is a kind of very important issue. Maybe we will come back to this issue afterwards. And mainstreaming integration policies and measures in all relevant policy portfolios and levels of government. These have been developed and discussed 2004. So when you look at the situation in Austria, 2002 was the first, let's say, first seeds of dealing with integration on a governmental level, but not in the government, just in some cities in Austria. 2002, the city of Dornbirn tried to develop the first mission statement, let's say, integration concept. Which was done in Austria. Then some of the cities have done this mission statements concept as well, but the regional governments started to do it 2007. 2007, I think, was the first regional government who was starting to development this integration concepts. Vienna was always a bit different. Let's say this way. Vienna had, let's say, the most burden to carry because the migration rate in Vienna was always much higher than in other cities in the regions. When we started to do this integration, these mission statements, we always had a kind of approach to invite all the relevant stakeholders in this development of these strategies, aims and measures. And of course, we always try to integrate, to involve the politicians, the decision makers as well. But this was the most challenging thing, because the situation in our work was that there was no clear position on the political level. there was no clear position on political level, on government level, on the regional government level, and of course also not in the municipalities, in the cities, in the rural areas in Austria. This was kind of really a great challenge. 2009 was the moment where the Austrian government, and there's a gap of 5 years, 2004, there was always kind of recommendations here how to deal with integration. 2009 was the moment where we got in Austria a kind of national integration plan. The way this national integration plan was developed was quite characteristic for this time. Nearly no civil society or organizations have been involved in this process. This national integration plan was already done at the end. Let's say beside the big NGOs, smaller NGOs initiatives, they haven't been asked to contribute to this plan. Finally, for example, we got invited to have a say, kind of to give let's say comments on the so far developed plan, and even this national integration plan. It took 3-4 years to see that measures which were planned in this national integration plan started to get implemented. So it's really I don't know why it took so long, and the politics was laid back, so nothing really was done for very, very long time. One important thing is that the integration measures, the agenda of integration was placed as an agenda of the Ministry for Interior Affairs. And when this issue of integration was discussed, it was always combined with security issues. So integration and security issues together, this was the let's say the main focus in the discussion on governmental level. What was also very, 2011 we got kind of a state secretary for integration. We thought a great moment. This was what we always tried to achieve, some responsible person in the government dealing with the integration issue in 2011. After 7 years of this already distributed common basic principles, which is written here at the end, mainstreaming integration policies and measures in relevant policy portfolios. So such a long time, yeah. 2014, the state secretary went in. So it was a kind of, yes, that's what I wanted to say. The situation was always the one that integration has to be discussed separately from asylum agenda. Yes, because I don't know why, but maybe this was kind of the way it was internally discussed in the government. This was always questioned by the initiatives of the civil society. We tried, so there have been this European Integration Fund. We always tried to involve the issue of asylum seekers. It was no way, not possible. In these years, from let's say from 2004, when some regional governments started to do this concepts on integration, there was a kind of let's say the development of structures for integration in public bodies. We have always discussed this intercultural opening of public services, employment of people with kind of migrant background. So it took a very long time, but finally these things happened as well. Vienna, as I said, was always different. Vienna has done, I don't know how they call it. They don't have a mission statement. They have a diversity concept. Yeah, and Vienna was also different. They have done a lot of efforts. They have since 2013, I think, they have this integration monitor where they try to find out the impact of their measures in the field of integration. This is, but just Vienna is doing that. All the other, let's say, bigger cities and regional governments are far away from that. This fact that the integration issue was always discussed beside the issue of asylum, I think this is something which can be seen now. This was a great failure, and if this, yes, you said one of the recommendations is integration from the first day on. This was always what we wanted to have in this integration field, because we had refugees at this time as well, but they were treated totally different from this work in the integration field. The situation now is that after we have this Ministry for Integration, which is a part of the Ministry for European and International Affairs, the activities went down a bit. So the focus on the integration work from the ministry's side is not the same as it was when this state secretary started to do the work. I don't know, that's my point of view. Maybe you see it different. Means that if the national governments would have followed the, let's say, recommendations, the principles which were developed 2004, I think that we would have a completely different situation, would have had. I don't know how this let's say political crisis concerning this refugee flow would have been different, maybe. I can't say that. The situation we have now is we have a lot of structures have been established in the field of integration, responsibilities in local governments, responsibilities in communities, kind of network of communities which try to force this integration work. So a lot of things happened, and I would say that there have been kind of a good structure to work on these issues, or on these aspects which were mentioned here to 2004. What we have seen in this crisis now, that these structures in a way didn't function. There was a kind of astonishment, and I don't know how this came, so maybe we can discuss it. I had a discussion with the responsible person for integration in the government of Upper Austria, and they said it's in this crisis where new initiatives arise. These initiatives have done a kind of parallel work to their structures, so they haven't been able to work together in a way, and maybe, and this is something which might be the case, that the structures haven't been so good as we thought that they would have been. Yes. This 2004 EU Common Basis Principles were, yes, 2005 it became a kind of agenda, means that the national governments have been asked to implement these principles which have been developed 2004. There was a kind of reaffirmment of the commitment 2014 of these principles. But when you look at these principles, you can say we are far away from what was described 2004. We are far away now from all this so important, let's say as aspects or measures of integration these days. Yes, and maybe the last thing I want to mention, 2016, there was an integration action plan of the EU announced, which the main issues are pre-departure and pre-arrival measures, education including actions to promote language training, participation of migrant children to early childhood and employment and vocational training, access to basic services such as housing and healthcare, and active participation in social inclusion. So, I just want to come back to one issue. This recommendation number 9 says the participation of migrants in the democratic process and in the formulation of integration policies and measures, especially at the local level, supports their integration. I know there was a try in Vienna to establish the possibility that migrants could have their vote in elections on municipality level, but finally it turned out that this was not possible because it was questioned by some court. Yeah. So still, this is something, and this is for me such an important aspect of integration, and exactly this aspect wasn't touched since years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Franjo.